Welcome to this webinar, How We Can Be Truly Stress-Free. Of course, stress is such a serious issue for so many people, and I hope from this webinar that you'll be able to get something of real practical value to you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a graduate of the medical school at Columbia University, work for the Department of Health in New York City, and have been involved with integrative and functional medical practice since 1980. First of all, it's more and more recognized the relationship between stress and our health. This is the so-called mind-body connection. And here from Harvard Medical School's founder of the Institute for Mind-Body Medicine, Dr. Benson, says that between 75 and 90% of medical office visits are due to stress. And the statistics on antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications is rather stunning. We now see where 1 in 6 Americans, including many children, take a psychiatric drug for mood-related disorders, that the use of antidepressants has risen 400% from 1998 to 2008. Now, of course, we want to welcome conventional medicine when it comes to the treatment of serious organ failure, serious trauma, emergencies. Thank God they're there for us. But the methods of diagnosis and treatment that do make perfect sense in an emergency are really not adequate when it comes to stress-related chronic disease. We have to go beyond just looking at the body as a complex biological machine that breaks. We need a very different approach, and this is where the field of integrative functional medicine comes in. It's much more person-centered rather than disease-centered. It looks at the root causes of stress and chronic disease in terms of disrupted biochemistry, metabolism at the cellular level. We usually think of stress and stress relief as essentially a psychological issue. But in fact, the leading science is actually clarifying that not only does stress have a destructive impact on the health of our physical body, but it's really a two-way street where metabolic disorder of our body affects our neurotransmitters, brain, nervous system, our moods, and our psychological function. Therefore, we need to understand the root causes of both the physical as well as the psychological factors causing stress. Now, again, the leading science is talking about the processing of food, the exposure to environmental toxins, stress, all of these things creating injury to the cells and a low-grade chronic inflammation. And they're linking it to not only all of many physical problems, but to our psychological health as well. And this chronic low-grade inflammation, it usually begins in the gut, in the gastrointestinal system, and then from there spreads to the entire body. In fact, 70% of the immune system resides in the lymphoid tissue surrounding the GI tract. So an unhealthy gut has profound effects on the health of our immune system and the health of our whole body. And the key here is the balance in the gut between the friendly bacteria and those that can cause disease. Unfortunately, again, because of modern diets, the processing of food, stress, environmental toxic exposure, infections, this can easily trigger this low-grade chronic inflammation in the gut, and from there it can spread to other parts of the body. And this is made even worse because of the use of over-the-counter medications indiscriminately. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are being overused in many cases, antacids. This is a serious problem for us. So let's take a quick look at what we mean by leaky gut. And here at in the bottom of the slide, we have the blood flow. In the top of the slide, we have the flow of intestinal contents through our gastrointestinal tract. And between the inside of the GI tract and the bloodstream is this single layer of intestinal cells that in a healthy person, there's a very tight junction between one cell and its adjacent neighbor. And this is to keep the bad things out of the bloodstream and allow only the nutrients and the good things to enter the bloodstream and spread to the rest of the body. Unfortunately, because of a lot of toxicity, low-grade infection, toxic metabolic food particles such as gluten, the predominance of these kind of destructive factors, we have a disruption of these tight junctions. They become porous. The gastrointestinal lining becomes porous. And things that normally would be kept out now are actually entering the bloodstream, activating an abnormal immune response. And from there, the immune system is activated through many parts of the body. And one of the key parts of the body that's affected by this leaky gut is actually the connection between the gut and the brain. They're in fact calling the gut nervous system the brain in your gut. It's kind of like a second brain. And there's a linkage here between what's happening in the gut, what's happening in the brain. And this is how disorders in the gastrointestinal tract can affect our mood, can affect our memory, and give us the experience of stress. This inflammation in the brain, which is through the same mechanism that causes leaky gut, causes a disruption of the blood-brain barrier, which is there to protect the brain from things that shouldn't be entering the brain. And so we have a leaky brain as a consequence. Leaky gut, leaky brain, it's all there in the science. And we see in these research articles, of which this is just one of many examples, they're linking major depression with these activated immune molecules that again, from the gut, it's spreading to the body, and in this case to the brain, causing depression. In this paper, they were looking at anxiety. And so we have to be able to look at this from the point of view of stress from the outside in, how these external factors are causing leaky gut, then causing leaky brain, then causing disturbance in terms of our emotional and mental life. That's the kind of part one. And so to overcome these physical, metabolic, and environmental factors that cause our stress, we want to begin with an assessment of the presence and the extent of the leaky gut. And fortunately, we now have such wonderful biotechnology testing through blood tests that can look at, for example, this leaky gut panel. And you can see here that we're looking at a number of different markers, zonulin, actin, actually the antibodies to zonulin and actin and LPS. This is a little bit technical, but you can see this person has a number of values in the high risk category and the moderate risk category. And so we want to be able to, on the basis of testing, then we want to move the triggers to inflammation of the intestinal lining. We want to replace it with health-promoting foods and healthier environment. We want to repair the damaged lining, re-inoculate with friendly bacteria, and of course we want to deal with stress from the inside out. And after 3 months of having a baseline report of the current status of the health of the gut lining, then in 3 months we want to retest. And here you can see that there's been quite a dramatic shift. There's still some issue, but a lot of the high risk has now moved into the normal level. This is what we want to see. The second part of the issue, of course, as it relates to stress relief, is from the inside out. And here it's very important to draw the distinction between stress itself, the experience that we have, and the stressors. So stress is that unpleasant pressure that we feel. The stressors are the triggers that have the potential for activating a stress response within us. Now, this is so important to understand, this distinction, because it means that we essentially create stress through the way that we respond or react to the stressors. Now, conventional stress relief focuses on stress being caused by circumstances outside ourselves. In other words, the stressors and how we can reduce the stressors. But if we don't understand that stress originates within us, We're left thinking that we've got to just cope with our stressful situation or change the outside conditions. But a much more empowering way to handle this is to understand that stress does not really exist other than through our own thinking. So the key is in developing a healthy psychological function, changing the relationship to our own thinking, understanding the psychological system through which we actually have our experience of life. And it really has to do with the whole issue of consciousness. And consciousness is a very complex subject, probably for other webinars. But let's just take one example of how our consciousness interacts with what is actually happening in the outside world and alters it. If we're looking at a full moon on a very quiet night, we have to ask ourselves, are we actually looking at the moon itself? Well, not really. We're looking at the image of the moon projected from the back of the eye and interpreted by our brain. Think of it from this point of view. Science has confirmed that the moon is rotating on its own axis while revolving around the Earth. And the Earth, in the meantime, is spinning on its axis at about 1,000 miles per hour and hurling through space at 67,000 miles per hour. All this movement, all this spinning, all this revolving, all this rotation at such speeds, how can the moon appear peacefully and stationary in the sky? Because what we see out there is really a projection of our own thinking made real by the action of our own consciousness. So we need, in order to have comprehensive and enduring stress relief, we need a multi-pronged approach where we deal with it from the outside in this case through private health consultations, as well as from the inside out, which I offer through meetup meetings. So your next step, please get in touch with me. I can answer some questions. Here's my contact information. I look forward to other webinars that hopefully will be of value to you. If you found this of value to you, please share it with your family and friends. And I wish you the very, very best of good health and happiness. Thank you.